My name is Maddie Sabatelli, and I'm one of the advocacy leads for the Columbus City Center chapter of IIDA, along with Kristen Stubbs, who couldn't make it today, but we try to put together some events like these to support advocacy and the the education around our profession of interior design. So we're hoping that this informal panel talk and informational meeting will help you understand a little bit more about what the NCIDQ is all about and get some insider input from people who have taken the tests and passed it. So I'll be throwing the mic over to each of our panelists to start, and then we've got a short introduction from one of them on the NCIDQ tests. So I'll just go by the order that I see you guys on my screen. So first I've got Liz.
Hey guys, I'm Liz Loxterkamp. I work for. Sorry, I got some super feedback there. Shannon, you might need to mute yourself. There you go. Okay, sorry, I had some super feedback. I work for MBBJ here in Columbus. I'm a healthcare interior designer, and I have been NCIDQ certified since 2019.
Thanks, Liz. Next, I've got on my screen Rachel.
Hey, I'm Rachel Husick. I'm an interior designer at Shift Collective here in Columbus. We do a variety of design from residential to corporate offices to hospitality. So just kind of all over the gambit. And I've been NCIDQ certified since fall of 2020.
All right, awesome. Hunter, you're next.
Who, me? So I'm Hunter Miller. I'm a interior designer at Trinity NAC and co-leader of philanthropy with my partner in crime, Carolyn O'Donnell, on the IIDA board. And I've been NCIDQ certified since, gosh, almost a year ago, guys, spring of 2021.
Nice, newbie. And last, we've got Kimberly, and she's also going to be presenting a little bit on the NCIDQ for us.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. So my name is Kimberly Woods, and I'm the Director of Engagement for CIDQ. I'm not an interior designer, so I have never taken the NCIDQ exam. And I also happen to be based here in Columbus, although our offices are in Alexandria, Virginia.
All right, thanks, Kimberly. And if you want to go ahead and start sharing the slides that you have and walk us through.
Okay, perfect. So get that set up here. Hopefully you all can see my screen here. So I'm here to give you guys a brief overview of the exam before we sort of switch gears into more of a panel format. As I mentioned, again, my name is Kimberly Woods. Since we are all virtual today, I do also have the chat box open on my other screen. So if you all think of any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat box. Or of course, you're welcome to contact me afterwards with any questions that you might have. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started here with a few reasons as to why NCIDQ certification is important. So first off, it is the industry standard. Our exam is the exam that specifically tests individuals on their ability to competently practice interior design. It's also a great way to serve as a differentiator, especially if you end up practicing in an unregulated jurisdiction like Ohio currently is. So becoming NCIDQ certified is an easy way for you to demonstrate that you have the education, you have the work experience, you understand how to apply building codes, and you understand how to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. It's also a great way for you to set yourself apart from your peers or from the competition, especially when you are seeking those different job opportunities. It shows that employer that you have taken the initiative and that you have dedicated to growing yourself as a professional. As it mentions, it is recognized by nearly every regulated jurisdiction in North America, the exception to that being the state of California. They are the only state that has a state-specific exam that tests specifically on California building codes. Otherwise, if you're looking to become licensed, registered, or certified in interior design in the US or Canada, you would need to have passed our exam in order to do so. You can see I've also included some independent quotes from the two professional organizations, ASID and IIDA, about a potential increase in your salary that you may see as a result of becoming NCIDQ certified. So a potential benefit you might see on the back end as well. And I have to forewarn you, I do have a little bit of a scratchy throat at the minute, so I might have to take a few water breaks as we're going through, but we'll get through it here. In terms of what I'm going to cover though, it will be all the basic information you need to know about the exam. Again, very quick presentation here. If you're interested in learning more at any time, just head over to our website at NCIDQ.org. It is the most accurate and up-to-date source of any information that you need to know about the exam. I do want to highlight some recent announcements that we have made. The first item there being the NCIDQ Candidate Handbook. This is available on our website. It is a very user-friendly, interactive PDF that you can take a look at, and it will answer all of the questions and provide all of the information that you need to know to get started on your NCIDQ certification. So how to become eligible, how to apply, what are the exams, what happens after you become NCIDQ certified. That really sort of one-stop shop, A to Z handbook, again, is a great reference, particularly for those of you who have not yet applied for the exams, or maybe you are early on during your certification journey. The other big announcement is the introduction of remote proctoring for our two multiple choice exam sections, the IDFX and the IDPX, starting in April. So traditionally, you would need to physically travel to a Prometric test center in order to take the exam sections. That option will still exist and it will be required for the Practicum exam section. However, for the IDFX and IDPX, you are now able to take them at your home or office computer via remote proctoring. So that will make the exam a lot more accessible in terms of you not having to travel to a test center. It will also make it more accessible in terms of the date and times that you're actually testing. So perhaps you're looking to test at 7 o'clock at night or on a Sunday morning, for example. Again, there are a lot more date and time options that would not be available at a traditional test center that is only open during normal business hours. That being said, there are a number of parameters that you would need to meet in order to go forward with a remotely proctored exam. For example, you need to have a clean desk area, so you can't have a notebook, cell phone, water bottle, anything like that. You need to be in a quiet and distraction-free room. You also need to have specific internet speed, a webcam that will be on for the duration of the appointment, as well as a few other parameters. And again, we have a frequently asked questions document on our website that you definitely want to take a look at prior to selecting that option, and that will go in effect here in April and will be an option going forward. So you've heard me mention these exam names, but to dive a little bit deeper, the exam itself is made up of 3 separate sections: the IDFX, the IDPX, and the Practicum. And you do need to take and pass all 3 in order to become NCIDQ certified. This first exam section, the IDFX, tests specifically on book knowledge, or what you would have actively learned in school. And you are eligible to begin taking that first section during the final year of your bachelor's or master's degree program, or anytime after you graduate, once you've met our education requirements, but before you have your work hours complete. It really is that fundamentals exam, just like it says, testing you on that information that you are learning during school. And we do encourage you, if possible, to take that sooner rather than later, or closer to graduation if you're able to do so, just because as a student or a recent graduate, that information is going to be a little bit fresher on your mind and perhaps a little bit easier for you to recall. You're already sort of in that studying, test-taking mindset. And again, it can be used to help differentiate yourself from the competition as you are seeking those initial job opportunities. The other 2 exam sections, the IDPX and Practicum, do require a minimum of 2 years of work experience. And those 2 exams are testing on what you were learning through practice or what you were actually learning in the working world. In terms of the format of the exams, you can see the first two are pretty straightforward, being all multiple choice questions. The practicum, on the other hand, does have some different question types, and we do have a demo video on our website that you would definitely want to take a look at prior to taking that third exam section. I've also included some pass rate statistics on this slide. We also do post these on our website following each administration. And it's really important to know that in addition to your education and work experience, you definitely need to put in the time and effort in preparing for the exams in order to be successful in passing them. When it comes to qualifying for the exam, we do require a combination of education and work experience. So you would just look at our chart here and determine which of these education boxes you fall into, and then follow the arrow down to determine the corresponding number of work experience hours that are needed. As it mentions here in the middle, everybody is able to count up to 1,760 hours worked prior to graduating. So if any of you did internships or co-ops or any other type of interior design work while you were in school, you would be able to count those hours towards the overall total needed to qualify for the exams. And when it comes to applying for the exams, there are essentially two options separated by this gray bar. I'm not going to go into that much detail today, but if you are interested in applying, I'd encourage you to head over to our apply page. We do have a short application video that walks through the application process in much greater detail and also includes some screenshots as to what you would actually see or experience when filling in the online application. But to briefly cover what the two options are, the top one here would be for those of you who maybe are currently in school or you're recently graduated, but you don't quite have your work experience hours yet. In that case, you would choose the two application option, which would be applying for the IDFX exam now, and then when you are ready and you have your work experience complete, you would submit the second portion for the IDPX and Practicum exams, which again are testing on that work experience. The other option for those of you who maybe have already graduated and completed your work experience, you would go ahead and apply for all three sections, and you can see that the application materials are the same no matter which option you select. Either option is totally acceptable, so it's really just a matter of what works best for you and sort of your career path. And the other thing I will add is that there's a common misconception that if you apply for all three exams at one time, you are required to take all three exams at one time, and that is not true. Applying for all three exams and getting approved for all three exams just means you are eligible to take all three exams. It is then up to you how you want to split those exams up within your application period. I'm going to take a quick water break here. Okay, looking at the fees here, this slide matches the previous one with those two different application options. Generally speaking, this application fee is a one-time fee. So to apply for the IDFX only, again, this is the two application option. This fee is valid for 4 exam administrations, which is about 2 years. Then when you are ready and you have the work hours complete, you would submit the second portion of the application for the IDPX and Practicum, which would be valid for 10 exam administrations or about 5 years. Or alternatively, you could go ahead and apply for all 3 exams at one time, in which case that fee would be valid for 10 exam administrations, or again, about 5 years. Once you have applied for the exams and been approved, and you are ready to start testing, that is when you pay this exam fee. That is the fee that you pay to actually book your exam appointment. And you want to wait to pay that fee until you are feeling confident, you're prepared, you're ready to test, because if for some reason you are not successful in passing the exam, or you need to cancel, or you don't show up, you would need to repay this full exam fee again in the future in order to retake the exam. So you can see that it could add up very quickly. All in to apply for the exams and take each one time, it is over $1,000. So it's definitely an investment in your future. And if you haven't had this conversation with your employer, I strongly encourage you to do so and talk to them to see how they can be supportive of your efforts in pursuing NCIDQ certification. A number of companies will reimburse the exam fees once you pass the exams. Some companies might provide time off for you to take the exams, provide time off to study for the exams, or perhaps provide a budget to purchase study material. So again, encourage you to have that conversation with your employer to see if they are able to be supportive of it. And if not, and you are an IIDA member, at the national level, they do have a scholarship available that you could apply for to help offset those exam costs. So that's another opportunity for you to look into as well. Looking at the dates for just a minute here, we accept applications all year round. If any of you are thinking of applying, you can see here that we are coming up on the application deadline for the spring exams, which is at the end of January. Otherwise, if you have already been approved for the exams, you can purchase them through the month of March for the exam offered during the month of April here in the spring. Otherwise, the exam is also offered during the fall in the month of October. As I mentioned earlier, all 3 sections of the exam are offered at Prometric test centers around the world, or for the IDFX and the IDPX exams, you will now be able to take those at your home or office computer via remote proctoring. It's important to note that it is the exact same exam, no matter where you take it. So if you happen to take one section here in Ohio, and then you move to Nevada and you take the second section there, and then you move to Australia and take the third section there. Again, it's the same exam and it will continue to travel with you as you move throughout your career because it is not jurisdiction specific. One of the big questions that we get, and I know we're going to address it here a little bit later, is what do I do to study for the exams? How do I prepare? As an organization, we do not recommend or endorse any study books, courses, online workshops, apps, flashcards, anything that's out there. That is all produced by independent third parties. They're not associated with us. And so it's really up to you to do your own due diligence and determine what might work for you. We often recommend checking with friends, coworkers, people you know, attending events like this to learn from people that have recently taken the exam. So again, you can learn what they used. In terms of what we have on our website, we do provide a listing of ASID and IIDA study groups that we're made aware of, as well as a list of books that are used to write the exam questions. So you might see some of your old textbooks or books at your company or local library that you might want to reference in your studying as well. The most important pieces when it comes to studying is this slide and the one right after. No matter what you are using to prepare, you want to make sure to come back to our website to download the exam blueprints that you're seeing here and the exam codes that are on the next slide, as those align with what we are testing on the live exams. These resources are available to be accessed at any time, including these test your knowledge practice questions. It's just 10 questions, a small sample, so you can get a better understanding of what to expect on those first 2 multiple choice exams. Again, if you look at these exam blueprints, they will detail the content areas we are testing on each of the exam sections. That includes a breakdown of the percentage of questions that are on or within each content area, rather, as well as some descriptions as to what you're expected to know or demonstrate under each content area. The other important piece when it comes to studying is for the practicum. Again, this is the 3rd exam section. It has some different question types on it. It is delivered through a different exam platform. For that one, you do need to be familiar with the 2018 IBC, International Building Code. And on our website, we have this sort of general codes document, this yellow button. And back in the fall, we had a fall specific codes document, which will be updated shortly for the spring, that detailed the chapters and sections that you needed to be familiar with for the practicum exam section. It is definitely something that you want to be referencing and incorporating into your studying for the practicum exam. You are not able to have a printed copy with you during the exam, but you can access it during the computer screen. And on the exam, you will be asked to demonstrate your ability to understand and apply the codes to the particular problem. The other resource we have available for the practicum is this case study standards, which details or provides more details about what each of those 3 case studies on the practicum exam will cover. Last couple of slides here. So I mentioned regulation at the beginning. Again, Ohio is currently a blue state on our map, which means it's not regulated. In many instances, it's just a voluntary step if you're looking to use a particular title like registered interior designer, RID, certified interior designer, CID. Even when it is voluntary, it is something that we strongly encourage you to do to help elevate and advocate for your profession. In some cases, it is required that you be licensed, registered, or certified in order to call yourself an interior designer, to practice interior design, to practice a specific type of interior design, like commercial interior design, or perhaps you might get some additional privileges like the ability to stamp and seal your own drawings. So it's really important as you all move throughout your careers and specifically practice in different jurisdictions that you are checking with that jurisdiction to understand what the local laws are in place and what you are not and are not permitted to do. And to tie everything back to the beginning as to why certification matters, at its core, it's opportunity. You have no idea where your career is going to take you, what type of company you might end up working for, what type of clients you might end up working with. Maybe you're thinking of starting your own company one day, or perhaps getting involved in higher education or seeking a leadership position. If those entities are not requiring NCIDQ certification, it is going to be strongly encouraged and strongly preferred. So I encourage you, if possible, to consider becoming NCIDQ certified earlier on in your career rather than later, just so you aren't limiting those opportunities that you might be able to pursue in the future. Final slide here. Again, I'll leave it up for just a minute with my contact information. I don't see any questions in the chat. I am going to hang around for the rest of the panel discussion, and I will go ahead and type my email in the chat just in case you want to jot it down later. But I appreciate you guys tuning in for this first portion here, and I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Madison to move on to our panel discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Kimberly. Lots of good information there. So for the next half hour or so, we'll move into the panel discussion. I forgot to mention before we kicked things off that you can continue to use that chat function on Zoom to ask your own questions as they come up rather than waiting for at the last 5 or 10 minutes. We'll be opening it up to questions, and you can unmute yourself and ask questions at that point, but we'll leave it up to our panelists to provide their input on taking the NCIDQ exams and what their experiences were for a little bit here. But we're happy to throw in any other questions that you guys might have about the test or the procedures or why even take the tests or anything like that. So we'll have some specific time for that at the end, but if you are like me and will forget the question that you have 30 minutes from now, then feel free to type it in the chat in the meantime. So I've got a few questions prepared for our panelists, and for you guys, feel free to, as soon as you think of an answer, shout it out and we'll kind of see where that takes us. But what led you to taking the NCIDQ exams?
I feel like no one wants to go first, so I'll take a stab at it. I think for me, it was a super huge personal decision, actually. I think I was finding that being in the room with some of these amazing designers, architects, consultants, engineers, all these people, I kind of felt like I needed to continue my education and just be one step above / equal to them. So I think for me, it was definitely something I personally wanted because I learned a ton. That's super applicable to everything I do every day. So it's definitely something I wanted to continue my education for and be a licensed interior designer. And again, advocate for our profession. I think the more people who are licensed, it really helps elevate us and just shows how valuable we are to the world. So yeah.
Awesome. Very inspiring. Rachel, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, just kind of building off of that. I definitely agree with Liz, but I also, and my company really encourages people to get licensed. So that really encouraged me. as well as covering fees and study materials for all of the tests. So it was kind of a no-brainer to just give it a shot, like a little less pressure, I guess, to just kind of go for it. But I definitely see it as kind of just like a confidence booster and a resume booster for sure.
I agree with both of what they said. I mean, it's like when I was studying for it, it was so rewarding, like how Liz was describing. But at the same time, my company is also the leadership above me really pushes for interiors in our office to get their NCIDQ. It's something that we as a team value and think that it's really important that our team members have. I think it will help you in conversations with consultants and conversations with architects. It puts you in a better position to have conversations that you may not have been prepared for coming out of school. School may not have prepared you for that. And so I think that it's, for me, that was huge.
Yeah, for sure. I was surprised when studying and taking the tests how much there was about the like kind of business professional contract side of things. So it kind of fills in the gaps in that way. To kind of build off of that question, do you all recommend taking the exams at a certain time in your careers? Maybe you could speak to a little bit about, at what point you started to take the tests, and there's an order that you take them in, but if you took them all at the same time or kind of staggered them.
Gosh, are we gonna go in order? Hunter, do you want to start?
I can go.
Yeah,
I was like waiting. I wasn't sure. Okay, well, I'll go. I did all three last spring in one go. I kind of went in there thinking, whether I pass or not, like, let's just give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. With the mentality that, if one doesn't go well, then I'll take it again, but that was kind of my way of thinking about it. Better to just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. I did 3 years, no, wait, I did 2.5 years of work experience prior to taking it. So I kind of just did it as soon as I could outside of school. I mean, I did some internship work and that kind of helped with that experience level as well. But I think that I wanted to have that sort of immersion into full-time work before I took this exam so that I was better prepared for that.
Yeah, I think Hunter doing it 3 in a row was super admirable and very like you really ripped the Band-Aid off. But I think you get it. I mean, you get it one and done, and I think it's good experience. I kind of did it opposite. I took the FX and the PX first, and then I took a year in between, and then I took the Practicum. So for me, I needed a little bit of extra time to study for the Practicum and just understand the fact that that format was different, still is different. So for me, it was a little bit different, but I think whatever works best for you in studying. And I also took it immediately as soon as I could. I think life's not going to get any simpler, and studying for that definitely takes a lot of time and effort. So I was dedicated to getting it done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it sounds like both of you took your multiple choice exams together. And I actually took the FX kind of within a year or two out of school before I had the experience for the other two tests. And while there were kind of benefits of that, I felt like, because there was more relating to what I had just learned in school on the FX, but I think there's a lot of crossover too with the IDPX. So I think there are some advantages to kind of lumping all that information together and kind of just studying for both as a whole.
Yeah, so different kinds of approaches. I think it also kind of depends on what you kind of think of yourself as a test taker. I have a few questions about that as well in terms of studying for the test. But just knowing, if you can think back to the last test that you took, that's kind of a big part of the NCIDQ, I think, is getting in that kind of stressful mode sometimes of needing to sit down and take what is it, like a 3-hour test for some of them. So knowing how to manage that and also manage your time on top of working full time typically too. All right, so some questions about the studying component. Were there any study materials that you guys learned and found to be the most helpful? Or, well, I'll save the next question, but focusing on study materials and what helped the most in preparing.
Rachel, you're up.
Okay.
I was gonna say the same thing.
I think a lot of us, from talking from our last panel, use Qrack, and I found like there are multiple resources within Qrack that you can kind of like, they're like little like learning lessons that you can do that kind of go along with the readings, which can be helpful. But what I found most helpful about that was just all of the practice questions and practice tests, because they do end up being really similar to what you find on the exam. And especially for that, for the Qrack test, that's kind of like a whole different format. So just really getting familiar with how the format of those questions and kind of like placing those pieces in the right spot. I think that I found that the most helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think most of us with Q practice, I actually use the Ballast Book quite a lot. And for me, that was actually super helpful to keep it as a reference kind of guide past taking the test, which actually I do reference it sometimes, which sounds really odd to say, but I was really into that. I physically like to highlight and write notes on things, so that was super helpful for me. But and they also had flashcards that went with it, and some of like they had practice test books, which was really great. Unfortunately, it is a little expensive, but my firm was also awesome in that they reimbursed for study materials and also for the tests as well, so it was helpful for me.
Yeah, I got there's a company called PPI that sells the like 3 workbooks for the 3 exams with practice tests. And then I got the 2 sets of flashcards. I think that FX and PX have flashcards as well. You can kind of get them all as like a kit for one price. So I got that, and then I also bought the book, right? And so I started with those materials, and like shortly within about a week after that, I bought Qrack because I was like, you know, I need to give this a shot because I don't even know where to begin. So Qrack does a really great job of sort of highlighting. They kind of take you through what are known as modules, right? And those will help you kind of identify key factors and information as you go through each of those. And I liked that it had sort of a reading guide because I read cover to cover that Ballast book, but if I hadn't had the reading guide break down through the Qrack, I don't know that I would have even known where to start except for page 1 of the book. And I think that they do a great job of helping you figure out where to target reading, and then the quizzes that come after that are really helpful to kind of review the material you just read.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And with the quizzes as well as the practice tests, like when you get things wrong, it kind of tells you like what area that question comes from, and then you can kind of reference back to those reading the chapters of the book that kind of comes from. So then if you didn't read the book cover to cover like Hunter did, then you could just kind of read some chapters where maybe you don't have as much experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the modules have like a great breakdown on each of those sections. So, you know, if you need a refresh on a chapter, or there's the vault videos, which I found to be super helpful for some of the more like complicated stuff for me, like gross versus rentable versus net areas, you know, some of that stuff that you run into that you may not work with in your day-to-day, depending on your market.
Yeah, I think those practice questions are the most valuable because you can know the information, but then when it's thrown back at you in a question form, it just looks a little bit different. I remember, and the books are dense, so even if you do kind of think you read everything, I remember taking practice tests and kind of being like, where was that even at in the book? And then you kind of go back and you're like, oh, that's right there, that sentence. I'll throw out there too that I didn't use Q practice or anything, but I made my own flashcards on Quizlet. And then I found other people who were studying for the different tests also on Quizlet, because you can make them public. I will say that some of them were wrong. So you kind of, if you're kind of studying with other people or sharing materials that are maybe not necessarily through a company that vets things, it's always good to even just check and make sure that things are up to date, especially with new building codes and things that might get changed around. So
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is like with the move from the Q codes to real building code, while they're still relatively similar, there definitely are differences. So using more up to date is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, and just being familiar with those resources. I kind of found too that there are several Ballast books out there that, in addition to like the main one for the NCIDQ tests, but I'm an educator now, and I feel like I didn't know everything about the things that were going to be on the test as well as I did until I had to prepare presentations to teach other people about it. So I think that's probably another good thing about either like getting a study partner or thinking about it as if you were going to present to a client rather than I need to know these facts or I need to memorize this stuff. Think about like how you might apply it or like teach somebody else about it.
I think that's a good point too, a study partner that you said, Maddie. I think the one thing that was my saving grace was I had a study buddy for all of us, and we kept each other honest, and we could bounce like questions off of each other. And it's also nice not to go through this alone. That can definitely be hard. It's a lot of dense content and it's a lot of it's difficult. So if you can find a study buddy or even just someone that you know has taken it or is in the field for a while, you can ask questions to someone you trust. I think that was also super helpful.
Mm-hmm. I also found it helpful too to like talk to people who had recently taken it. Like I bugged Catherine so much before I found out Asoke was also taking it. So I think that, if there's somebody around you that you can use as a resource, definitely do if they're willing. Bribe them with chocolate.
Willing or not willing, it's helpful.
Another thing I wanted to add, because I didn't have a study buddy, so I had to kind of like motivate myself to actually like schedule my test. And I feel like that was like, okay, now I know I have 6 weeks or whatever that I have to crunch and study. So it was like that helped me get motivated to study, was just getting it scheduled.
Yes.
Agreed.
Gives you a deadline.
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
in our industry, I mean, I'm motivated by deadlines, so.
Yeah.
And an expensive deadline too. Those are not cheap tests. So
Yeah. And when it's coming out of your pocket up front,
Yep.
I mean, typically at least you have to get it reimbursed, but when you put the money up front and with the thought that you may not get the money back,
Yep.
You're more motivated for sure.
Agreed.
Right. You got to find out what motivates you, whether it's lost money or maybe a little piece of chocolate after you get through that module.
That's going to be our theme for the night.
We were talking about that before. Chocolate always motivates me. That's how I get through grading assignments and things for sure. I wanted to circle back to a question that we got in the chat since we had talked about some study tips and strategies, and then we were talking about finding getting a study partner, but the component of getting a sponsor or advisor for these tests. Maybe in addition to getting someone to just be there alongside you, but there's also the fact that you have to get somebody to sign off on the paperwork, right, for sponsoring you and saying that you've completed the number of work hours and all of that. So what did you guys do for that piece?
Totally forgot about that actually. I think I was able to, so I am University of Cincinnati is where I went to school, and I was able to use our co-op hours. So for that, I reached out to a couple of my just advisors from co-op and I had them sign off on those. But then I was really close to my boss at my current firm and he was able to sign off on those hours. So I think just someone that you trust and someone or that you've worked a lot with and they can vouch for you and validate the fact that you've done the work. I think that was the easiest, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I had my boss that I've been working with since I've been here at this firm. I did all my hours for the form here, so I was just able to have her say, yeah, you know, he's done it.
Yeah, I had all my hours under the same firm, same
Mhm.
supervisor. So, and she was already NCIDQ, so it made it pretty easy for me.
Right. Yeah, Kimberly, go ahead.
So I'll just add to that from our side. So whenever I hear the word sponsor, I sort of think of it like in two different components. So one of them is to like actually qualify for the exam. So getting those work experience hours signed off on. So ideally, that would be your direct supervisor. And if they don't meet one of our criteria, similar to the others, that would be somebody from your network. So maybe your current boss, a former coworker. Again, somebody that's sort of already familiar with you, your work experience, your character, your work ethic. Again, you already sort of have that trust and that relationship built up. That being said, if you are no longer in touch with individuals, you don't feel comfortable approaching them about that, or maybe you just don't know anyone who meets the criteria. First, there's some lovely people on this call who are all NCIDQ certified, so they meet that criteria. But if that doesn't work for you, you can always reach out to us and we can try connecting you with one of our ambassadors to serve as your sponsor. The caveat to that is that essentially that person would be a stranger to you at that point. And so it would be up to you to, set up those calls, have those conversations with them to detail, what type of work you've been doing the past 3 years, for example. So maybe they want to have an interview with you or do a reference check or walk through your resume. Again, whatever information they need to see and hear, whether that's 1 hour worth of calls or 6 hours of calls and 12 emails, that would be between you and them to sort of figure out. So that's sort of getting the actual work hours signed off on. If you're looking for it more in terms of studying, again, there's some great connections on this call that have recently taken the exams that I'm not going to throw them out there, but perhaps you could try connecting with them. And again, our ambassadors, we have people who have recently taken the exam. So if you're just looking for sort of general exam advice or general tips as to what people's different strategies were, you can also utilize them for that as well. So that's sort of the two areas that I see it.
Shannon, did you have something to add?
Hi. Sorry, I'm used to Teams where like you can join your audio and video on like one link. So I'm not used to Zoom. Yeah, I'm the one who asked that question. I'm kind of in the latter boat that you described because I graduated in 2016 and I've been with my dealership for almost 2.5 years. So I have plenty of work experience. No one in dealerships is like NCIDQ. I don't know why. Maybe I'm making a generalization there, but I'll be the only one who has done it in my dealership. So finding a sponsor, I'm in Q practice. I'm knees deep in Q practice. Like I am in it. I am living it and breathing it. It is very stressful, but yeah, finding the sponsor has been a little bit of a struggle. So I'm glad that I can like reach out to CIDQ and get like an ambassador, because that was like the thing I was the most nervous about qualifying, because I should qualify everything else but that. So do you know the best person to like contact? Is it you, Kimberly? Is it somebody else?
It is actually me. Yeah, I also manage that program. And so we have a number who volunteer to be sponsors, which is like really great that they throw their hand up for that. But if you are interested in this, would sort of be a decision you can make on segmenting it even further. Some of those individuals have taken the exam in the last year or two. So they're very familiar sort of that current format versus some others that, you know, took it in previous versions. So you can just send me an email. It's best if you can include like, you know, 2 or 3 sentences, just some basic knowledge of what you've been doing or your LinkedIn profile or something, just so I can send it, because sometimes people like to connect with people that they have a similar background to. But yeah, I could send out an email on your behalf and get you connected to one of them. It wouldn't be a problem.
Yay. I've been so stressed about it. Thank you so much.
I'll just
That'd
say
be
along
great.
with that too, that like attending this event tonight is great. And I don't know if you're an IIDA member, but I'll just like give them a little plug here. But it's a great way to network with peers and people that are in the same industry as you. And again, all of these people have been through this process, so they can really, again, share some other insights that you have. Maybe they're not interested in being a sponsor in sort of the work form sense, which is totally fine. But we all want you to be successful. We're all here to sort of support each other towards the same goals. So don't be hesitant to, you know, reach out to people in your network, or maybe they're not in your network yet, but they could be here in the future. So.
Okay, awesome. I am a member, but I joined in like late 2020 or early 2020, which was obviously like not the time to like join a network. So it's been a little rough, but you'll be hearing from me. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for asking that question. I always kind of forget about those kind of just like paperwork kind of things that you have to figure out with NCIDQ, especially if you run your own business currently, or I agree with what you said too about maybe not finding a whole lot of NCIDQ certified people on the representative side. And there was no one in my office that was NCIDQ certified at the time. So I had someone, I think you can have, I think this was okay. I'm certified, so it was probably okay, but they were an architect, a registered architect to be a sponsor.
Mhm.
So a couple different outlets, but yeah. A few more questions to wrap us up, and then we'll have some additional time for sort of end of session questions that you guys might have. As far as we got through study materials and a few tips and tricks in terms of getting ready for the exam, for our panelists, what's the biggest takeaway or exam experience that you would want to share with those beginning the process? What do you kind of think is the most important mindset to have starting out?
Hunter, you want to start this one?
I feel like I've started the last like 3.
I mean, I'll start if you want.
You already started. You go.
Oh gosh. Okay. Let's see. I feel like I took it so long ago. This is hard for me to answer, but I think honestly, just being in a positive mindset with it. Everyone goes through this journey differently, and I think it's definitely difficult, but there is a huge, rewarding, amazing light at the end of the tunnel, and all the effort and hard work and sacrifices that you're doing now are totally worth it at the end. And I think, I mean, again, it will just build and boost our profession and give us such a higher standing in the world and even with our peers. And to be able to say I'm a licensed designer is pretty cool. I think a lot of people unfortunately look at you better if you say that. I think we struggle every day with just, you know, getting people to respect our profession. So I think for me, that was a huge, huge thing. So it's so worth it at the end, all the hard work, and, you know, it's difficult, but stick with it. It's worth it. You got this.
Rachel.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was just gonna add, like, don't be intimidated. Like, kind of just kind of start digging into the material and registering for the exams. Like, I wouldn't wait any longer into your career than you need to. So.
Yeah, I second all of what you both said. I feel like for me, it was like talking myself back from the ledge, like trying not to get overwhelmed and just like letting Qrack and like, you know, break up the material for me and just focus on the goal and take it one task in one section, one chapter at a time, trying not to get incredibly overwhelmed because it is a ton of content in a very short period of time. And there's a lot of things that you're trying to learn while also managing your life on top of that, right? In the middle of this world that we're living in currently. So, you know, it can be very stressful, and just, you know, try to pull yourself back. And if for some reason, you know, you're too in it, take a break. You know, breaks are important. You know, give yourself a Saturday once a month or something like that, you know, at least, and breathe, you know, and kind of do something that's not studying, because the studying will be there when you get back, you know. And that's really important, to keep a level head as you're going through it.
I wish someone had told me all of that while I was doing it, because I think I definitely put a lot of self-pressure on myself, because I scheduled it and I was like, okay, I have this schedule, I have to get through it, I have to complete it. If I don't complete it, I'm going to be hard on myself. So definitely give yourself grace. I mean, I agree with Hunter. You're living your life, you're working, you're doing all these other things on top of this crazy amount of studying that you want to do. So I think for me, it was helpful as I finally figured out that I could not study during the work week. I just didn't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. So for me, I just dedicated Sundays as this is my study day. I'm going to study for X amount of hours, get through this, and just call it a day. And I did study for about 4 months before my exams, but for me, it was that was just what worked best for me. So I think finding what works best for you, sticking to it, definitely was helpful. But yes, give yourself some grace.
Yes, I 100% agree. And for me, I managed to find like an hour and a half a day. Like even that small amount of time, I think can help. Like if you really like stay at it consistently, whatever it is that you can give for a couple months, then you really start to understand the material and remember it. And I think that was really helped me.
Yeah. And don't get overwhelmed by the fact that you're probably already behind on the Qrack schedule. It's okay. And like, if you schedule your exams later in April, Qrack ends right before April. So you'll have an extra 2 to even 3 weeks if you schedule the last week of April, like some people did. So then you'll have a little bit more time, you know, to actually still prepare.
Nice. Thanks, guys. I'll add too that if you happen to not pass one of your tests the first time that you take it, I can say this now, maybe after passing them, but it's not the end of the world. And you do get a couple extra tries. It is still an investment that you're making, but I think it's pretty common to, not pass. They're pretty hard tests. So to not pass all of them the first time, especially if it's by 1 point, which is what my case was. But you can get back out there and do it again, especially if that's kind of in the boat that you're in right now. If you have taken some of the tests before and are trying to restart some of that process, or continue taking the ones that you have left.
And I think
yeah, go ahead.
Kimberly touched on it, but like hopefully you'll end up seeing a return on the investment, both financially as well as other ways. Like it's very common to either get a bonus or some sort of raise as like a reward. So even if you do end up having to shell out the money yourself for the exams, you should get that return on investment in more ways than one.
Yeah. And adding to that, some firms will require it later on in your career for you to be promoted into a leadership or management position. So getting it out of the way now while you don't have, other obligations outside, maybe you're like, you don't have kids, but you've got your plants. It's just, now might be the right time.
You just reminded me to water my plants.
Yeah, me too.
I got you guys.
All right. We'll wrap up with some questions. So I got a few in the chat just about on Q practice, and if it might be better to hurry through the material and catch up if you're behind, or to start where they are and make it up as you're able to. Do you guys have any input on that, if you are familiar with Q practice and have maybe been behind before also?
Definitely. I'm a procrastinator, so I did not follow their schedule whatsoever. I just kind of created my own schedule and didn't become concerned with what was going on. I know it can be helpful that if you're struggling through a certain portion or module, that it can be helpful that you can kind of interact with the other people that are in that group and ask questions. But I didn't find it necessary to follow the schedule that they provided.
Yeah, I was the same. I think it put too much. I tried it first, and then the minute I got behind, I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna do what works for me and the time that I have. And yeah, don't put too much stress on it.
Yeah, I think I was behind a week the entire time. And like when you get into the later modules, except for maybe module 10 or something, like modules like 6, 7, and 8 are a lot shorter. From what I remember, you know, in terms of content, in terms of the actual length of what the reading is, in terms of the number of questions on the quizzes. So, you know, the front end of it is quite a lot, you know, kind of just take your time, you know, don't get pressurized from the calendar. Like, it'll be okay. You're going to do great.
All right. Any other questions from our audience? Yeah, any final thoughts from the panelists as well?
Go forth and conquer.
You got this.
I agree.
All right. Well, you guys have given some great tips to everyone tonight. I think it's been really helpful and gets everybody in a good mindset for getting started on the process of getting their NCIDQ. So thank you everyone for attending and listening in. We'll have this recording available after this session, and you can watch through it and look through some of those resources again if you need to. But thank you for attending.